welcome to CHGO Red Stars Podcast, presented by DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook. Download the app and use promo code CHGO when you sign up. It's your girl, Sandra Herrera, back at it. My friend, homie, and colleague, Claire Watkins, scam originator. How you doing today, buddy?
I'm good. We're doing this obviously every other week now, and we're like, oh, that's great. We'll have like lots of stuff to talk about every time we do the show. And like, little did we know that
little did we
Yeah.
know that we would have
this much.
Welcome to the therapy hour of CHGO Red Stars. I thought when we last linked up a couple weeks ago, we chatted about like an off-season overview. We went full steam ahead into the regular season. We were like, wow, look at what's happening here. 2 L's to start the season, but there were like things right within that we were chatting about, and we were like, you know what? Early parts and phases of the season, you're gonna get some losses. Maybe you'll drop some points. Talk about the bright spots and the silver linings, and one of those definitely was Mallory Swanson. And yet here we are now talking about a different side of that coin. So I guess we got to start with the biggest headline for the Red Stars probably over the last couple weeks, referring it to it as a Red Stars and Stripes update. There was an international break, so the Red Stars did have some playing time. They played against Mexico women's national team, and several Red Stars players went off on international duty with the United States Women's National Team and Team Canada as well. So for the Red Stars, they had BSG, Bianca St. George's was off with Canada, Mal Swanson, Alyssa Nair, Casey Kruger, and Tierna Davidson linked up with the Women's National Team for 2 friendlies against Ireland. 2 victories out of the April window there for the U.S., but major loss in the form of injury to Mallory Swanson. She sustained a knee injury in the first half of the first friendly against Ireland. And there was a bit of a collective holding of breath, I think, when that happened. And then what has come out since then is full update and report, not just from U.S. Soccer, but Mal Swanson herself. She did sustain a torn patella tendon in her left knee. And she took to her personal socials just to thank everybody for all of their thoughts and prayers, their warm wishes, the text messages that she's been receiving. But she kept it real, and I appreciate that. She said that she was in shock. She really didn't have much else to say other than the thank yous, and that she's going to try to lean into her faith like she always does, and try to just look ahead and look forward. But not great for her personally, for the United States Women's National Team, and definitely not for the Chicago Red Stars. So,
yeah, I mean, it's like 2 things, right? This is what we've been balancing, and I'm sure everybody has heard about this, even just outside of the Red Stars context. But it's brutal. Like, it's not only it's a story. It's a story that is about the U.S. Women's National Team, right? Because she was in what she brought to the team on both sides of the ball, both the U.S. and Chicago, irreplaceable, right? Though they are now going to try to replace her because you have to. You have no choice. But it's also a story about a person. I think that everyone was starting to see a very clear journey that she was on, and a very clear arc. She had made plans for, like, they had such plans for this summer, right? The whole Swanson family, and seeing those change so radically in real time, with how serious that looked immediately, was confirmed to be very serious, though. Obviously just happy that Swanson is okay. Like, she is going to be okay, and then you worry about soccer later. But yeah, I think that those are like the 2 things that you have to balance, right? Which is, this player is irreplaceable. You're heartbroken for the person. But then, because of the way sports are, you're like, okay, this is now just like day 1 without Mal. What do we do?
yeah.
And you have to keep going because you have games to play, and you can't just give up, right?
I think that's the that's the mindset.
Chicago
Uh,
Red Stars 2023. You can't just give up.
you can't just give up. You know what? I love that we're doing this like kind of like bi-monthly now.
Yeah.
And I think like every time we check it, we should just have like a new
Mhm.
slogan for the
Yeah.
season. Let's see how many we can come up with in one whole Red Stars season. So I think we're up to 2 right now with this one. But yeah, I think I'm with you on that 100%. I think just sort of checking in around like all of the sort of mental aspect of thing or sort of just the perspective of it all. Um, Hearing from Petroselli, before their next game and getting a chance to ask him a question about it, like asked him, what are the conversations that changes like for the players on this team? Because something that came out of that international window, for people who don't know, we took a little road trip with St. Louis to cover these national team games. And we heard from Andonovski as well. And like flat out saying in a post game conference, like, yeah, this, we have to look ahead. It absolutely sucks. I'm paraphrasing here. But he essentially stated that this team definitely moving forward as the World Cup was getting closer was going to be structured around Mal Swanson and Sophia Smith. And to lose such literally the half of that kind of overall shape or look of the team moving forward, like trying to look elsewhere for other options and things like that. And I think when you look at the national team scale of it, it's a little different, right? I mean, that's a straight up machine
Mhm.
point. In terms of, well, where are they going to look next? Like, no, you're not gonna find another Mel Swanson, but you're gonna have a massive amount of talent
Mhm.
in your forward pool or your expanded bubble of forwards and players within that you can maybe try to look to say like, here's how we can try to supplement ourselves moving forward. And I think when we try to look at that for Chicago and ask that, to the head coach in Petroselli, it's a little bit different. The conversations are, well, first of all, we're not like they're not going to replace Mel Swanson. And you shouldn't necessarily throw that type of responsibility on the forwards that you have on the Red Stars right now. And he kind of broke it down into 2 parts. Said, well, actually, it's an opportunity for us to get better defensively.
Mhm.
They let in less goals, and maybe you keep yourself afloat. And while that doesn't maybe fully answer the question of how do you replicate the goals that someone like Swanson provides for the Red Stars, maybe you still kind of take it game by game, kind of hype up your forward core there, give them the opportunity to kind of make a statement within those games week to week, and that even maybe they would look outside a little bit for some extra help, because that's not out of the realm of impossibility for this team still. But I think there's been a couple weeks here to where it's just sort of, I think, finally settled in for everyone. I think having the very quick update from U.S. Soccer and Swanson, she's already had surgery, has said it was a success, and now it's just kind of getting back to the rehabilitation process and return to play protocols. Um, and the Red Stars have already had a game without Swanson, and so maybe they can kind of take this and move forward. And we're going to talk more about the game, but in this window, um, it wasn't just Mal Swanson representing for the Red Stars. We had Alyssa Nair, Tierna Davidson getting back into the mix in this international window, and Casey Kruger also making her return to the national team. And I love that we were able to go to that second match and watch that one in person, because we got to see Tierna Davidson and Casey Kruger make their return to the national team. And I thought they looked all right, I think, in those games.
Yeah, I think I thought both played really well, honestly. I think unfortunately for Tierna David, well, not like unfortunately, it was fun, but
Yeah.
they had sort of set up this sort of fun Becky Sauerbrunn moment for the first 15 minutes
Yes.
of the second game. It was her hometown. It was her like celebrating her 200th cap. That's like what friendlies are for. It's fine. But that meant that Davidson had to come on, I think it was like at the half hour mark or something like that. And so that's a little bit tough to do as a center back. And I think she looked a little bit nervous, but she also, I thought, just kind of showcased, well, here's the best way to put this. She looked like whole. Like she looked like the ball was moving where she wanted it to move. She looked like her recovery speed was a huge asset to the team because they play with really aggressive fullbacks. She would drift into those left spaces when she was behind Kelly O'Hara for the last 15 minutes of the first half. She would do the same with who was it that was in the, I forget who was on the left in the second half, but it was Kruger, right?
Yep.
And so moving into those spaces, good interplay with the outside backs. They were playing against a mid block. The way to play against a mid block is you need both of the center backs to sort of be pushing the issue with these longer balls. She and Alana Cook both tried to do that. Obviously, Alana Cook kicked it all the way into the goal, and that was great. But that was a specific tactic that they were playing out, and I thought that she did a nice job. And then Kruger did not actually look nervous at all. I thought she looked very focused. Just she's so good at what she does, and you can immediately tell because they started fouling her a lot.
Yeah.
And so just like immediately when you have a shutdown defender like that who's able to switch the direction of play that quickly, suddenly a team specifically like Ireland is going to start just trying to stop that player from moving. And they did that. And I was like, well, hope she's okay, but also like respect. That's a show of respect from the other team. That I thought was
hacky
really cool.
sack, but you're hacking the player that's making things difficult for you. No, that was dope. I'm not gonna front. That was awesome to see. I think from Chicago kind of lens, right? You're just like, yes, like these players are they're back, baby, and they're doing all right. Because that's some of the the storylines and the narrative kind of coming out of the national team for this specific camp. Like there were so many players kind of making their return for the first time, whether obviously it was Julie Ertz, who was like kind of the headline stealer in that one. But like Kelly O'Hara getting back in the mix, and Davidson and Kruger obviously a part of that equation as well. But I was curious if we were going to see extended minutes at all for Kruger. I kind of felt like Davidson was a player that they definitely wanted to see some time from, but I was like, well, like, are we actually going to see Kruger in the mix? I mean, there have been times when she's been called into camps and maybe she was a part of the competitive environment, but wasn't dressed for like game days. So to see her kind of get like a full half, I thought was pretty good. And I think some of that narrative around it was not only are some of these players back, but that coaching staff, that national team coaching staff wants to see how they look.
Yeah.
And to see Tierna Davidson kind of open things up for that team going up, against Ireland for a second match, and then watching Casey Kruger get an opportunity to fly down the flank a little bit. I think it was a really good positive sign for those two players, is like now they return to club, because that's the other part of it. Now they got to depend on club play to maintain their fitness.
Yeah, they're making the decision really hard, I think is the best way to put it. I think you watch that game wasn't amazing, I'll be honest. In the chat, did we yell at the almost Sauerbrunn header? It was more like an ooh.
Yeah, shout out to Rita. Yeah, we
kind of a gas.
We reacted.
Yeah, there was a reaction. You try not to yell, but there was kind of like a but yeah.
Is it happening? Yeah.
There is also a moment sometimes too, when you are in a press box, and you can't always tell in the exact moment like who did what numbers are for. And so like there was a little bit like, oh my gosh, was that Becky Sauerbrunn? And it was it was also kind of funny. Her heading form is very distinct, I would say. She has a very distinct form. She does it like whole body, like
it's
from the torso. She heads from like the full torso.
Yeah, it's not just a header. It's like full upper body movement. It's like whack-a-mole energy. It's like boom, all of a sudden there she is. It's also funny because like we got to see the incredible new facility of St. Louis MLS City side, and it definitely had that like new stadium smell to it. And it was funny because it's funny to hear that, Rita's asking if we reacted, but the way it's set up, there were also some players within the general vicinity of the press box who were like watching the game. So there was, you definitely heard like reaction.
You can hear Rose Lavelle going like,
Rose Lavelle like, it's so funny. So it's like, how can you, not? It was definitely not a reaction-free zone. Let's just
for
say
sure.
But
I mean, maybe to pivot over briefly, simultaneously to that US window, I think we got to talk Mexico a little bit, right? Like,
so the other side of that is the Red Stars played a game. The Red Stars played a game against Mexico at SeatGeek, and if you went to that game, you got to see
it was fun.
Many goals in this game. Who could have predicted it was a 7 spot? 7 goals in that one?
It was, oh my gosh, it was 5-3?
5-2.
5-2. 5-2. Yeah.
Right.
5-2.
I was like, Lucky number 7, baby. Yeah, goals from everyone, really. I would love to hear your perspective on the Red Stars specifically, because that was not, unfortunately, the game of my dreams was a game.
Yeah, you were having a lot less fun than I was.
Not able to attend just due to some work scheduling conflicts. But yeah, Mexico versus Red Stars, a dream in the making, and it happened. And we also got to see like some Red Stars that we haven't necessarily seen in action right away, which I thought was kind of nice. And I would love to hear your thoughts on maybe seeing some of those players, Bianchi, stuff like that.
Yeah. From a Red Stars perspective, I do think it was ultimately, I mean, I think in retrospect, incredibly productive, right? Because it's like all the internationals were gone, and then they found out. It was a very weird scene where kind of surreal, where you're watching this game, everyone's having a great time, really, really fun. The US game is happening at the same time. Mallory Swanson gets hurt, maybe like at the 30-minute mark of the first half of the game I'm watching. And so it's like sliding over to Chicago comms and just being like, did you see? And they're like, yeah, we don't really know what's going on. But so there was like highs and lows to that day, because I think it was like right after that game ended, Petroselli found out that Mal had been hurt kind of seriously. And but the game itself, I think, first of all, it was a very friendly. Let's say that. Like, it was no one was trying to get hurt. It was like very low contact, not heavy tackles, like on both sides, which is great because that means you get to see both teams kind of cook a little bit. And obviously we saw Maria Sanchez and Diana Ordonez continue their like incredible run of form so far. And Charlene Corral got a goal. Like, it was great. But the thing from the Red Stars side that I thought was interesting is like they got popped a couple of times, right? I think they went down like 3-0. And so they just like weren't totally ready for what Mexico brought in like that first half hour. But then we saw, I think, a little bit of like a mentality response from that group where they were like, no, we're not going down like that. Like, we might not win this game, but we gotta do something. Right. And so I think that was where you start to see maybe some of the new threads of where this Red Star season is going to go start to begin. Penelope Hawking had a very active game in that game. She did not get on the score sheet, but she is that kind of a player where you could see she was very eager to get on the ball. She was very eager to defend. It's hard to kind of describe sometimes rookies' sort of physicality. Like, some rookies' physicality, you're like, this person looks like a pro already. I think like Tierna Davidson was a really good example. The moment she showed up at the Red Stars, you're like, this person is physically ready for professional soccer. Hawking is another good example of that. She just looks right on the field. And then we saw kind of that progression play out in the next game we'll talk about. Obviously we saw the midfield. I'll be completely honest. It was a friendly. The defensive midfield was not really that interested in defending. I was like, it's cool. This is like, we're all at 60% here. That's chill. Mexico too. Like, I don't want to act like Mexico is going like all out. Like, it was just like a chill vibe, which is why we got some sweet like Mexico bangers from distance, right? Which is, I was gonna say, it was a little bit of like, it kind of gave me like a taste of like, wow, what if we had like an all-star game? Right. Had, like, exactly. Stuff like this. Exactly. I loved it. I was able to see some of those highlights, and I was just we got like an Olympico, like that was amazing. From a newly signed Red Stars player that people are like still kind of learning about, I feel, and not sure what to expect, and kind of waiting to sort of see, Yuli Bianchi kind of continue to make her adjustments, to NWSL. It was just so obvious what she can bring. I think, as we know, the NWSL is kind of brutal on both sides of the ball. And I think that this was like the perfect game to get her minutes. I hope that they continue to build that trust in her. Cause I think that the NWSL midfields are like Thunderdome. Right. And so it's like, it's so obvious what she can do. How do you make sure that she has the support to be able to do that? Which I think is like the ultimate question for the Red Stars midfield in general. No, I would say I think it was a mostly successful international window. If you're removing the very devastating injury and just the stuff out of your control, it's like that's the soccer part of it where you're just kind of like, okay, like we have to maybe look at some of the other things that happened during the window. Nair with a shutout, return to the pitch on the national team level for Davidson and Kruger. Red Stars, younger players, newer faces, getting a pretty important game, I think, in the international window, because they are like
one of two teams who are not going to kick off their Challenge Cup this week. So maybe good that they got the extra game in hand before this next series kind of kicks off in NWSL. But some positive things to take a look at. Maybe you're looking at players and you're saying, those are the type of players I would bet on. And you know what? If you're the betting kind, DraftKings Sportsbook is the official betting partner of CHGO and ALLCITY. You can download the app now and sign on up with the code CHGO. And new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA with code CHGO. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. So make sure you take a look at all the fine print when you get involved in making those bets. Listen, we've seen a lot of that. We've seen a lot of that popping up in a World Cup year. Honestly, there's already certain odds and things out there. So if you are someone who is intrigued by those types of things, maybe you use DraftKings and code CHGO to go ahead and kickstart your game betting in the process. But maybe you also look at the Red Stars and you say, hey, they win and got to win. Maybe
I was going to say, I'm not sure I would have bet on that exact scoreline, but hell yeah.
But it makes you raise your eye a little bit. Maybe it makes you say, I'm going to pay attention to this a little bit more moving forward. But Red Stars get their first win of the season, a week 3 match against Midwest rivals, Kansas City Current, a 4-2 scoreline. So who knows? Is this the start of something new and special for Chicago, where they're a part of games with like massive scorelines now?
I did think it was kind of funny that, the messaging from the team is like, we're clamping down. We're clamping down.
Yep.
We're gonna win 1-0, and then it's like 4-2. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about that. Like, looking at these last few weeks for the Red Stars, just all of it together. The week 1 opener, I feel you, Rita.
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
100%. In NWSL, I feel you. Show's over. We're cutting it short. It's true.
That's all you gotta say.
It's true. It's true. 3 points, man. Looking at that week 1 win against week 1 loss against San Diego, that's a 5-goal kind of way to kick off your thing. It was 3-2 scoreline. Then they go ahead and they have this like 7-goal fest with Mexico. We said it was 5-2, and now a 4-2 win against Kansas City Current. I'll count me in on the side of the crowd that was saying like, hey, like this is probably going to be an ugly game. Like maybe we're not going to see some of the prettiest soccer, one of your classic gritty grinders, eat 'em up kind of games. And that was not necessarily what we saw come to life in this match. And it was funny to just sort of like you mentioned, dude, just sort of what we heard out of the press conference and then kind of rolling into this game. I'd be if the general tone is like, you know what, we're going to lock this up. We're going to lock it up. We have opportunities here to make sure that we kind of compete in what could be potential, kind of narrowy kind of battles. And then this happens. Was excited kind of to see what the team was going to present, because when I think as a team, when you are presented with something like that, a devastating injury that obviously first and foremost impacts the player and their life moving forward. And then the second phase of that is like, how do we continue to navigate this season moving forward? Because you set up some things as a team in a year like this, when there's a World Cup, right? When maybe you're going to be without a star player or 2 or 3 or 4 for certain stretches of times, and you prepare for those kinds of things. But then something like a really kind of devastating injury like this, it forces you to kind of replan again a little bit, maybe in a certain capacity.
On the fly too, right? It's like there's no real time
like the regular season has started, and you started it at this point with 2 losses.
What I think is interesting too, I had this thought because they made a signing this week, which I'm sure we'll get to, but Swanson is sort of in this interesting gray zone too, where no official timeline has been given on her injury. It's a serious one. It's a surgery. You know, it's like we're at the point where we can't say definitively she's not going to make the World Cup, but like, guys, but the reality is, if Chicago is in a stone's throw of the playoffs by the end of September, it's not necessarily a hard no. It just depends, right? So do you place her on SEI, like for the cap space? We don't really know what their cap situation is. Maybe they have enough cap room without, they did, lose some free agents over the offseason. Maybe that's not a concern. Maybe you hold on to that cap space because you have a player that you want to have available if she's possibly available at the end of the season. But I just think that's interesting too, where it's like you have to adjust on the fly. It sounds like the signing that they made this week was in the works pre-Swanson injury, which is like how that has to happen anyway. You can't just like go find somebody in 2 seconds. But I don't know. I'm curious how that will work for their bottom line as well, which is like they seem reluctant. Like, for example, when Simone Charlie for Angel City ruptured her Achilles, they immediately placed her on SEI, right? Which that is a thing that you do because then that person's salary, they still get paid their salary, but it no longer is part of the cap. And so that allows, like, for example, Angel City signs Yuli Ulibaki. Like, those things are important for how you get under that cap line. For Chicago, I don't know. I have to assume Swanson is their highest paid player. It's just I'm just curious. I think that's just a curious puzzle for Michelle Lomnicki to kind of balance, I guess, for the rest of the year.
Off your regular day-to-day X's and O's kind of things, like the sports business player movement side of things is something to keep an eye on and maybe follow up on, for sure. It wasn't too shocking to hear that out of Petrocelli in the pregame. Honestly, like, I appreciate the trend. Like, there's no chicanery. There's no like, oh, like, will we or won't we? Or, it's like, those are all things like, don't be an unserious club. Like, those are all things where it's like, you're looking at all possibilities. Obviously, the primary things are like working with what you have, which means, yes, we're going to talk about possibly, tightening things up on defense. And we are going to take it week by week and continue to have those discussions with our current forward core and present appropriate game plans and task them with certain responsibilities moving forward, depending on the opposition, right? Those are all smart, good, normal things to say. And also another smart, good, normal thing to say is, hey, like, this is a scenario we did not want to find ourselves, but it's here and we might have to look outside for some help as well. And that is a very cool and normal thing to say. So it was like good to hear it. It was great to ask and great to get the answer with you. And that I don't think the recent signing is necessarily something that targets that, because it was something that was already in the works prior. But in terms of this actual match and what we got to see from the players, really great to see Shayna Matthews get a start. She's a player that they picked up in the offseason and who's also kind of working her way back into form. I mean, she's a mom of 3 precious boys and like trying to get back into fitness. It's the World Cup year.
And she scored over the international break as well.
So Shayna Matthews is like, she's trying to do things with Jamaica's women's national team, right? And so we are all here for the CONCACAF supremacy that will take place in 2023's World Cup. So shout out to the Reggae girls and Shayna Matthews getting a goal there. But I know you and I have really liked what we've seen just when she was coming off of the bench and kind of what she was providing for the team in those moments. So to kind of see her get a start and kind of build her way into a game like this, which apparently didn't take too long, I thought was awesome, because it was also great to hear from Nair and Petrocelli about how, like, that this is a player that we are going to continue to be careful with. We want to make sure that, like, she's going to build on her minutes and her form, but we are very excited about her addition to this team and this roster.
Yeah, I mean, Shayna Matthews is a player that, obviously her career has, I think she's had periods of availability and periods where she's not available. But she's always been very steady. She's a very steady player. She knows what she's doing. Even when she was coming in as a sub, sometimes subs come in just to like run at defenses. But I think that with Matthews, it's immediately, again, like, I really noticed like off the ball sense, and her off the ball sense is so strong. Great defensive recovery, A lot of times when she was playing off Swanson in those first 2 games, she was pulling defenders. She was really good at pulling space to open up space for other players. And so when you have an all-around player like that, and all they need to do is kind of get the touch and fitness back, that's great. That's like an incredible asset to have. Especially like, for example, when you're playing off a rookie who maybe, and it's interesting too, right? Because Swanson's no longer on the field. So rather than reacting to Swanson's movements, which I think has always really worked for Chicago, you now have players that are like, okay, now I'm reacting to, Ellis Stevens movements. I'm reacting to Chaina Matthews movements. Yeah. And you can kind of see here, just very disciplined. They very much kind of like stayed in their spaces. I think getting BSG back, getting her starting was awesome.
Love a
That
pass
helped.
network.
Yeah. And it
Shout
made
out to
things really
Ariel.
nice and wide. I just think they did a nice job. I think they did a nice job. I mean, obviously Kansas City is a team in flux themselves, but this is what you want to see. And it's really, it's cool because it's like somehow we talk about the DNA of the club a lot. I don't know how many wins Chicago is going to get this season. I don't think they know how many wins they're going to get this season, but to come out after a devastating player loss with this disciplined of a performance, with the understanding that you're probably going to be stretched, I liked it.
Yeah, I'm here for it. I think this is the phase of the season where it's like it's still very early on. We talk about that a lot. I like maybe even like that first quarter of a season, like those first 6 weeks, like you're still going to get teams who are maybe trying to figure themselves out in terms of like team identity and team culture. But when, again, shout out to Ariel for producing these awesome graphics for us kind of after these games. When we see like a pass network like that, we're like, okay, like the Red Stars have presented themselves in a very specific formation over the last few weeks, obviously stemming from last year a bit as well. And you're kind of just seeing the comfortability, I think. And I think that is like promising for me as someone who like views and covers the Red Stars and wants them to do well and see the players succeed. I love that. I love a pass network like that, and I love goals. I'm not gonna act like I don't love goals either. And I love goals for rookies as well. Like that's awesome. I love the kind of international break energy that like Penelope Hawking was presenting to Mexico, and then kind of bringing that over to this NWSL fixture against Kansas City, because not just her first goal as a NWSL pro, but she recorded her first brace as an NWSL pro. So good for the rookie for getting on the scoreboard pretty early in the season. And shout out to the XG race plot. I think maybe this kind of tells where the game possibly got away from the clean sheet. I think when we're looking at when Kansas City scored their goals and kind of the closing end of the game there, we're talking 75 minutes, 70 or maybe 15-ish minutes remaining in the match. But definitely want to kind of highlight that 80 French own goal and sort of what we were talking about with Chaina Matthews. She walks away with this game. She is on the scoreline, so she picked up that assist on one of the goals for Penelope Hawking. But this own goal, I think, is like, if you go back and check out the highlights of this goal specifically, it's like probably the definition of like a forced own goal.
Mm-hmm.
Like if someone is like looking like, well, what do you mean that a forced own goal? Like an own goal happens because somebody makes a mistake, and that's not necessarily true. I look at this kind of own goal and you just see all of this work that Chaina Matthews does to ensure that she's like on the ball, technical on the ball, in a good position, takes a good shot, because it clearly causes enough chaos to force a bad angle on French, and you see it go off her back and into goal.
I think that whole plot is a really good example of how XG is really useful, but doesn't always like tell the whole story. The XG had Chicago finishing with like 0.68 XG.
And here they are.
And which is that indicates, right, that like what XG kind of analyzes is based on the position of where you are shooting, the defense around you, how often a player scores from that position. If you go back and you like watch the tape of that Ellis Stevens goal, the Kansas City's defense is like a disaster in that moment. And so if you looked at that, she's like basically from the penalty spot, you would think that has to be a high XG chance. And then XG gave it about like a won, I think. So I don't know. I thought that was sort of interesting. I think that is also, though, a good testament to the Hawking goals, which is that they were off angles. They were both far post shots off of a little bit of a tight angle, which is just like, those were nice finishes. These were not like tap ins. They were defensive breakdowns, but they were defensive breakdowns in transition. It did not necessarily mean that she was just hitting it right in front of goal. I just think that, like, you would look at that, you could look at that XG and be like, oh my gosh, Chicago got lucky. And it was a very wide open game. Like I said, Kansas City has their own issues, but they took those chances were just well struck. And I think that the fear when you lose a star striker is the players around that star striker either start to force it, or they get their confidence is lost because they don't have that other person around anymore. And I think that we just didn't see that. And again, for all of Kansas City's defensive issues, like, I don't know, Vanessa DiBernardo started this game for the Kansas City Current. Dabinia came into this game. They had some playmakers too. And the fact that Chicago was able to come out of this with the win, I just do think is, again, we can't predict the future, but it is one for, I think, the team to feel really good about right now. And they are going to be in shootouts. I know that they say that they want to clamp down on defense, but I'm like, are you changing your formation? Are we going to a 5-back? What are you talking about? It's going to be like that. Yeah.
I'm glad you said that, because we already touched on some of like the previous scorelines that we've seen from this team.
Yeah.
And now we've got this most recent one. Right. And I'm just like, I don't know, man. Like, is this just
going
to
like lean into their destiny?
I was going to say, like, is the absence and loss of like Mal Swanson just confirmation that this is going to be like the Red Stars gunslinger era?
Right.
Like,
everybody be shooting. Yeah.
Like, you know what? We need goals, so I need everybody to get at least one shot on goal. Like, everyone's gonna try, and I'm here for it. Like, it's we love the pleasant surprises. I mean, we got to shout out to Ella Stevens. We haven't spent some time talking on her, but we should, because she got this game rolling very early. Got the opening goal in this game in the 4th minute, right after Kansas City kind of tried to get on the front foot themselves.
Again, it's just not being phased. It's just understanding that other teams are going to get chances against you. Like, that's how they're set up. They're in a 3-4-3. Like, that is going to happen, but you just can't like lose your cool. You move the ball quickly, and hey, goal for us. So
yeah, I'm eager to see you know, what it's going to mean for this Red Stars team, like a victory like this, like what it's going to mean for them moving forward as they continue on their early phase of the regular season here. Could it lead to another win against, you know, their next pitcher, which is going to take place on Sunday, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But that also means they're on the road, so you aren't going to be able to go and necessarily catch a game at the Red Stars for about a week or so. But listen, if you want to get tickets to the next Red Stars game, maybe you should try Game Time. Okay. It is absolutely one of the best ways to go ahead and check out tickets to games at various price points, because buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sorts of sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They have killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee as well, so you can stop stressing over the tickets and just start getting hyped for all of the fun that you're going to experience. So make sure you use code CHGO for $20 off when you download Game Time and check out various tickets. So yeah, you can see upcoming games there, you know, that you could go ahead and take a look at and maybe try to purchase some games in the future. Maybe it's a good timing to sort of have a pause.
A brief attendance talk, yeah.
We'll have a pause a little bit, because we love the Go to Games initiative. We are big advocates of that, because there's some great soccer here in NWSL. We get to see a lot of it up close. Sometimes we do a lot of work to cover not just the Red Stars, but the league and the teams, other 11 teams involved in general. So we know how good the product is here. So we are definitely like all about that. And something else that came out of this recent game, it's the second home game for the Red Stars. So this was not their home opener, but it was an absolute summertime shy energy of a weekend for this game, and unfortunately, a dip in attendance compared to their home opener. So we're talking they just cracked about 2,000 for this game in attendance. So I believe the announced attendance was 2,356 for this game, and you always got to be careful with the announced tickets sold versus who ends up going to a game. I mean, the eye test versus the numbers test that gets put out is always a little bit different. Sometimes you're like, some of these things don't maybe add up or match up with the other. But I think the other side of that is we're in year 11 here for this franchise, and it's just kind of we just see the same trends that we have seen kind of year in and year out for this club.
I mean, yeah, I think for me, I'm going to be honest, like the only difference here is clubs for sale, right?
Yeah.
They're in a bit of a holding pattern probably until that gets finalized. The intention is for them to stay in the Chicagoland area once that sale is complete. And then this is going to be, I think, something for new ownership to really tackle, whether it is a location change and they pursue moving to Soldier Field, or they pursue other options. But I think the Red Stars are in a tricky spot. Obviously, faith in old ownership, previous ownership was not high. There was a devolution in sort of the supporters group relationship with the team. That 134 looks very different than it did 3 years ago. And all of those things are pertinent and relevant in addition to the issues of it's not easy to get out to. Summer traffic on 55. I don't wish that on anybody, to be honest.
Because we made that drive.
We did it. We did that. Not my favorite. And so I think you have the same issues that you've always had with Chicago that make it, quote unquote, a challenging market. We've said a million times that we don't think Chicago has to be that way, but it is not something that is getting fixed until a sale goes through. And so you just hope that at the very least, like my hope for this summer is that there are people who can find a way to sort of fall back in love with the team because of the way that they play and feel comfortable supporting, like I'm talking about existing women's soccer fans, feel comfortable supporting the team in whatever way they want to. Outreach to the average Chicago sports fan is clearly not happening right now, but I don't know exactly how you can until you know what's going to happen next.
Yeah, it's a lot of just unknown variables, right? I think that come into play with that, and that's not to say that it's an excuse, but I don't think we're actually going to sit here and not act like it's not playing a factor for some folks and their want or non-want to go ahead and buy a ticket to a game at this moment.
Yeah, it's not the players, it's not the team, it's and I think again you can use all the same stuff from years past, but I do also think that this year is unique. This is a unique situation, and I would think that the best way for it to be resolved is just to get the team sold ultimately. Yeah,
I think having something definitive, right, will help kind of propel things and elevate things in other areas, and that's one of them, I think, for sure. It's just a bummer. It kind of sucks like that this is like a thing that's happening during a World Cup year for so long, has been a driving point for teams that typically had independent ownership or investors within major markets like Chicago specifically. So I think you look at the landscape of the teams at the time, maybe even back at the previous World Cup, when you're looking at teams on the East Coast, whether it was a DC area team or New Jersey area team or Chicago, kind of major metro kind of areas, and looking at those kind of World Cup bumps, moving forward, and because of new casual interest, perhaps. But yeah, in an area where that has been like a struggle before in the past. And we saw in 2019 how that kind of impacts, the bump kind of impacts. And we saw certain sellouts over the course of a 2019 World Cup year. We saw increased attendance over the course of a World Cup year during an era of time where a team had like a Julie Ertz or Sam Kerr, et cetera, right? So it's just one of those things where it's like you never want to like tell folks who are fans of like a professional sports team to like lower your expectations on that. And that's not what I don't think we're doing that at all, but it's just a thing that is noticeable.
Yeah.
We are noting it and we're talking about it. And I just don't know if that's something that is going to increase over the course of this year until maybe some of those other unknown variables have actual answers moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I think it's worth being frustrated about. I mean, I think it is frustrating. I think the distressing of the team as an asset over the last couple of years is frustrating, right? It was unnecessary that it had to get to that point. That there is just like no fan foundation to rely on as the team goes through this sale. Like new ownership is kind of starting from scratch, and we know that. And unfortunately, that is just the case. That is just where it's at. There are many things new ownership could do to really turn things around very quickly. We saw 6,000 people show up for the Mexico game. And then you go back to right. And it was great. It was really fun. And like you said, the interest in the international game is booming. We're seeing similar struggles with the Fire. It's like they're having trouble too. I think professional soccer in Chicago is still really just not finding good ways to connect with the city. And that is, it's a unique challenge, I guess, for whoever takes over. But until someone takes over, there's really no point.
And then maybe we'll have like a different conversation about
exactly.
Like when those things kind of come into play. But no Challenge Cup game for the Red Stars.
Yeah, they're one of the two teams not playing tomorrow.
Yes, one of two teams not actually playing tomorrow. There's 5 games kicking off Challenge Cup on Wednesday tomorrow, but they'll be back at it on their regular season hunt on April 22nd on Sundays, but they're going to be on the road in Seattle to face OL Reign. So again, not at home. They'll make their return. I believe at that point it'll be May. But hey, shout out to the OL Reign, one of 3 teams apparently also looking for new ownership in NWSL. I believe in my notes I have, get in losers, we're getting new owners. And that's maybe that's one of the angles that we're going in for this game. Going to be not the Red Stars' first game on the road, but it is going to be their first one in the Pacific Northwest. They did open up the season against San Diego, out of Cali. Now they're going to Washington. Who are they going to see in OL Reign? We're not sure. Maybe the return of Rose Lavelle. We didn't see Rose Lavelle with OL Reign over this last weekend. I would assume that we might not see her or have limited minutes from her in this Challenge Cup game that they're going to have against Angel City. I'm sure with the World Cup coming even closer, precautions are going to be made with a player like Rose Lavelle. But I think even if somebody like Lavelle is available for like 30 minutes against the Red Stars, that's something that could be a problem. That could be a problem for Chicago on the road. But typically, I think they've had some pretty good games against the Reign, whether it's at home or on the road. And I would anticipate that this might be another one of those games.
The Red Stars love an early season game against the Reign.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
We love to kind of like
pop. They love to give the Reign like learning experiences that the Reign then use to like rise up. But yeah,
it's funny how that works out sometimes for some teams. No, I'm with you. We also like love history. We're a weather show and a history show, all at the same time. Like, and that's one of those things like we look back on history between the two teams and say, actually, sometimes they punch each other in the face for friendly fire, like no actual animosity, just friendly fire. But I would love it. I would love a draw between these two teams this early in the season, but
just no penalties, man. I think my number one thing is just like don't give up any penalties.
Was that like the thing? Maybe another one of those like silver linings things that we're taking away from this Red Stars game. It's like, hey, no penalties. There was a look. There was a look and they got away.
Yeah.
So I was like, improvement right
Mhm.
there. Chicago Red Stars not getting bit by VAR. And who knows, maybe this game coming up against Rain, unclear. The announcement recently that the Chicago Red Stars they signed Sandra Stark on loan from Wolfsburg till June 30th, which is a nice way of saying that probably actually till June 26th.
Yeah.
Because there's an international deadline that international players who will go and play in the World Cup will be out of the league probably by the 26th. So if Sandra Stark gets some good minutes, maybe we might see her with Germany. Maybe we won't. We'll see what happens. Either way, it's only till June. But something getting announced for the Red Stars where we could possibly see some different looks in the midfield for this team moving forward. Things are pending her visa right now. So unclear if she's still going to be available for the 22nd. Fingers crossed on that one. But we'll see. Who do you got? You have a win, a loss, a draw for Chicago?
Ooh, yeah, hard to say. I think they're going to concede first, but I think they're going to come back for a draw. That's what I think.
We love it. We love a draw.
That's right.
We love an early season draw.
They're gonna come back. They're gonna sneak it. They're gonna sneak a point. They're gonna sneak a point.
So it's gonna be a draw that feels like.
And you know why? You know why? Because OL Reign does have a Challenge Cup game, and the Chicago does not. So that's what I think.
That's good thinking there from you, pal. I like that. I like the draw. Let's go for the draw that feels.
I just think I can just like sort of imagine the Laura Harvey post game like in my head right now of like, you know, he is all the minutes that we had to play in the last three match days. Why is she from the north in my head? That's not her accent. Sorry.
That's not her accent.
Sorry, Laura Harvey.
Well, you know what? I loved it. And I think that's a great way to close this out with improv, ladies and gentlemen, because we are also an improv show here at CHGO Red Stars. If you like what we do, you want to become a diehard and let us know how much you want to support us. That's the best way to do it. Go ahead and sign up for a CHGO membership. You get access to all sorts of cool things, podcasts, live shows on every team. Every single day, you get access to some post-game shows. There's premium written content for members at allchgo.com. You get access to incredible merch for every single team. You also get a free shirt when you become a member, and you get access to the members-only Discord, the CHGO Lounge. So make sure you sign on up for a CHGO membership. And that's a wrap for us. That's all we've got for you here today on CHGO Red Stars. We appreciate you all joining us. As always, goodbye. We will see you in May. The next time we link up with you all will be in the month of May. And maybe, fingers crossed, the summertime shy vibes will return by then. But until then, everybody stay safe and have a good time.